Welcome to this investor briefing on Wells Fargo in front of its annual shareholder meeting happening tomorrow. My name is Susanna McDermott, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility. And again, we thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon. You'll be hearing from several investors today, some of whom have been engaging Wells Fargo for nigh on a decade on a variety of questions related to risk management and responsible lending. All the investors on today's call are co-filers of a resolution requesting a business standards review, which is on the proxy to be voted on at the company's annual meeting tomorrow in Jacksonville. In addition, we'll be hearing from a Wells Fargo customer directly impacted by the unauthorized account scandal that broke last fall. In just a moment, I'll be introducing our speakers, but before I do, a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to make sure everybody understands how we'll be taking questions. You will all be in listen-only mode until after the speakers have made their remarks, and they will be doing so in succession, so we're going to hold all of the questions until after they've finished. I encourage you to type in any questions you have along the way in the question box you should have at the right of your screen, as we'll be answering questions in the order we receive them. As you type in your questions, please identify yourself and your organization so we know who you are, and do let us know if you have a preference who the question is directed to. When we begin the Q&A, we'll be taking the typed questions first. So as I said, I encourage you to go ahead and enter them as they come to you. To ask a question live during the Q&A, please click on the raise your hand icon. There's a little hand icon, again on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will unmute you to ask your question. Again, before you do that, please just let us know who you are and who the question is directed to. And now we're going to turn to our first speaker, Sister Nora Nash, who is joining us today from Jacksonville, having just arrived for the meeting tomorrow. Sister Nora is the Director of Corporate Responsibility for her order, the Sisters of St. Francis of Philadelphia, and the lead proponent of this resolution we mentioned on the Wells Fargo proxy, requesting a business standards review. So Nora, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you to all those who have joined us today. The Sisters of St. Francis of Philadelphia have been using Wells Fargo as their local bank for our sisters stationed all across the United States. We are the lead proponent with 16 other proponents of a proposal entitled Business Standards Review, which will be voted upon tomorrow at the annual meeting. Wells Fargo chose to change the title to Retail Banking Practices, which attempts to confine the issue to a single business unit, retail sales. Not so. We are keenly aware that Wells Fargo's problems stem from unaddressed historical structures and systemic issues that have not been open to constructive internal and external assessment. I am speaking to you today because Wells Fargo Company has had very serious difficulty managing its assets, and not just financial. Moral and cultural values, code of conduct, services, operations, customers, employees, shareholders, products, and responsibilities and risk. The values and codes that were the bulwark of a long history have been defaced and eroded from within. Members of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility have been concerned about Wells Fargo's leadership and management for several years, and we have consistently challenged the company on issues of economic justice and discriminatory practices. We raised concerns about various aspects of its codes and policies and challenged the company on its responsibility to ensure the financial suitability of its products for all its customers, which also includes mortgages. We were convinced that in spite of Wells Fargo's vision and value statement, there was an underlying culture at the company that put excessive pressure on employees. Over the past 3 years, our meetings and dialogues with the company representatives appeared to have little impact. The board, for the most part, was passive, while corporate leadership had amassed excessive salaries, workers were abused, and customers were subjected to various cross-selling frauds and mortgage nightmares. At this point in time, the company is not in denial. Yet, the magnitude of the impact has not yet been fully realized. We do acknowledge the sales practice investigative report by the independent directors of the board for what it is, and the subsequent key findings from the board investigation, action plan, update, and path forward. Page 7 of the key findings tells us volumes about the past ineffectiveness of the board, corporate risk committee, and human resources. These documents justify our request for a business standards review. I draw your attention to the fact that several state funds and many coalitions and citizens share our concerns. Why are we concerned? A needs to improve CRA rating and an astronomical list of settlements and fines will continue to have serious consequences on sustainable growth. Just note the number of cities, institutions, and ordinary customers who have taken steps to cancel or lessen their relationship with Wells Fargo. Even the city of Philadelphia is contemplating removing the $2 billion payroll, which will be voted on in July. Shareholders remain concerned about the long-term viability of the company, and we look beyond the annual meeting for urgent remediation for customers in a restorative process and a full commitment to ethics, values, principles, and risk management. We seek metrics, assessments, and qualitative and quantitative data that will assure shareholders that corporate responsibility is embedded throughout the company so that the rebuilding of trust can begin. This is a major call for systemic change. It is a matter of justice and integrity in the culture and business standards within Wells Fargo. And it is also a call to stand for economic empowerment across all business lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Next, we'll hear from Seth Magaziner, General Treasurer for the state of Rhode Island. Go ahead, Seth.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Seth Magaziner, the State Treasurer in Rhode Island. I'm speaking on behalf of the 60,000 active and retired public school teachers, police officers, firefighters, state and municipal employees who are members of the state pension system and whose capital was put at risk through the irresponsible practices at Wells Fargo. 60,000 people who I work for deserve a full and comprehensive account of what occurred and what is being done to ensure that nothing of its nature ever happens again. The full extent of the damage to Wells Fargo customers, employees, and shareholders is still not known, and a full accounting of the root causes of this widespread fraudulent activity at the company and a clear plan for corrective action will go a long way toward rebuilding trust and ultimately increasing shareholder value. We need to know who knew about this situation, when they knew about it, and what is being done to correct the culture that allowed such a widespread set of inappropriate practices to occur. Shareholders in Wells Fargo need to work together toward a common purpose, toward improving the culture at the bank, toward mitigating risk, and ultimately increasing value. But in order for that to occur, we need the Wells Fargo board and management to own up to the fact that there are deep cultural issues that need to be addressed. This is not simply a matter of replacing a few individuals or launching a new office. This is something deeper, and that is something that we need an indication from the board and from the management that they understand and that they are willing to seriously address. Ultimately, we believe that this proposal is in the best interest of Wells Fargo and of all shareholders. That's why we, at the state of Rhode Island, are co-filers of the proposal. That's why we will be voting in favor, and that is why we encourage all other shareholders to vote in favor as well. With that, I'll say thank you to ICCR, to Sister Nora, to all of the folks who are involved in promoting this proposal. It's a good proposal ultimately for the bank, for the shareholders, and for all other stakeholders. And I thank you again for including me in the call today.
Thanks, Seth. And now we'll hear from Michelle de Cordova, Director of Corporate Engagement at NEI Investments in Canada. Go ahead, Michelle.
Good afternoon from Canada. NEI Investments is the largest and oldest provider of retail responsible investment funds in Canada. And I'd first like to talk to you about why we co-filed this proposal. Here at NEI, we do not often file shareholder proposals, but we felt constrained to on this occasion because the scandal created great concern amongst our stakeholders in Canada, even though they were less directly impacted than the US stakeholders. We wrote to the board after the news broke in the fall, asking, amongst other things, for them to undertake this business standards review. Although the bank was willing to engage with the ICCR group convened by Sister Nora, it didn't accede to the request for the review. So we felt at that time there was no alternative but for us to co-file the proposal. We do acknowledge some of the positive steps that Wells Fargo has taken so far, but I'd like to explain why we are standing behind this proposal and encouraging peer institutions to vote for it. My team at NEI is responsible for our proxy voting operation, and in determining whether or not we're going to support a shareholder proposal, we always consider whether the proposal may have become moot because of the company's actions since filing, and whether the proponent has made efforts to engage the company to find a solution. So with that context, I must tell you that we feel very strongly that the proposal is not moot, and we can very much vouch for the fact that Sister Nora and the other proponents have made strenuous efforts to engage with the company up to now. Our feeling is that the focus in the report has really been on the sales practices controversy and the positive and negative actions of some individuals in the executive team, rather than looking at the culture of the company as a whole. We feel that this particular controversy is very important, but it certainly isn't the only controversy the company has faced in recent years where there has been some kind of ethical aspect. We really believe that Wells Fargo needs to consider the wider question of culture and ethics to ensure that we don't face another controversy like this in the future. And we believe this is vital for the long-term sustainable value of this company. We feel that to undertake there must be internal and external stakeholder input to ensure the full scope of what needs to be covered is covered in a business review. We believe that shareholders and other stakeholders can be real partners to Wells Fargo in this review if Wells Fargo is open to that. I'd like to mention a few things that we would like to see further addressed to ensure that the business review is as comprehensive as it needs to be. Firstly, we'd like to see the bank address how to refresh and rebuild ethical culture down from the top of the company and up from the bottom, just in the same way that safety culture is built in industries with high physical risk, of which we have many here in Canada. We're also concerned that the report lays bare that community banking was viewed as and compared with the retail stores selling as much product as possible to customers, rather than seen as a responsible provider of needed financial services to people. We want to know if that's still the case, and if it is still the case, how is that going to be changed? We also feel that while the report provides valuable information on what happened within the bank, some key aspects respecting harm to stakeholders have not been fully addressed and are still under investigation. We want to know what the extent of harm was to customers beyond unwarranted fees, and were vulnerable customers targeted. We want to know what happened to the whistleblowers and whether they were penalized. We want to know why the employee satisfaction surveys didn't reveal that there was a toxic sales culture. And we'd like to see those kinds of questions addressed in a comprehensive report. We also want to know what indicators the Wells Fargo board will be monitoring in future, and what will be disclosed to us as shareholders that will allow us to track the rehabilitation of retail banking at Wells Fargo. As a proxy voting practitioner, I would like to note that the timing of the report from Wells Fargo was extremely challenging for investors to reflect on fully in the midst of proxy season and just before the annual general meeting. Finally, we are sorry that Wells Fargo didn't take the opportunity to support the proposal. We really feel that we are on the same side, seeking to build a better bank for the future, and we wish that Wells Fargo will recognize that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Okay, and now to Kevin Stein, Deputy Director of the California Reinvestment Coalition. Go ahead, Kevin.
Great. Thank you, Susanna. So again, my name is Kevin Stein, and I'm with the California Reinvestment Coalition. We're a coalition of 300 nonprofit organizations throughout the state of California, and we are a proud co-filer of this resolution. First off, much thanks to Sister Nora and ICCR for leading this effort to make Wells Fargo a better company. We at CRC, and we're based in San Francisco, we've been especially upset to witness the harmful conduct of our hometown bank. We want to see Wells Fargo succeed and to better serve its shareholders, its employees, its customers, and its communities. Wells Fargo should be a leader in small business lending, in financing much-needed affordable housing, in helping Californians attain and maintain homeownership, and facilitating entrance into the financial mainstream for all residents by opening stable and affordable bank accounts and offering products that are in the best interest of customers. But instead, over the past 10 years, we have seen quite the opposite. The bank was sued by the Department of Justice for discriminating against Latino and African American borrowers. The bank overcharged FHA borrowers and was accused of defrauding the FHA program. The bank offered a triple-digit interest rate payday loan product to its very own customers. The bank also foreclosed on thousands of Californians and was rated as the worst loan servicer in our last 2 surveys of nonprofit housing counseling agencies. It has gotten so bad that our state and local governments have moved to stop doing business with the bank. Recently, as Sister Nora noted, even banking regulators, who in our view are often accused of grade inflation when it comes to Community Reinvestment Act performance ratings, had no choice but to give Wells Fargo an extraordinarily rare and low needs to improve CRA rating. And shockingly, if not for the great investigative journalism of the LA Times, the vigilance of the LA City Attorney's Office, and the critically important regulatory oversight of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the present consumer account scandal may have continued to this day. The account scandal has rightly angered and captured the attention of the American public. But over the past decade, Wells has been operating as if we were living in the Wild West of banking. During this time, who was driving the stagecoach? How did it get so derailed, focusing on extreme profit above all else while betraying the public trust? And how can shareholders, employees, communities, and the public be assured the stagecoach will right itself and find its proper course? Our resolution is an important first step in calling for a systematic review of problems and a plan to fix them. The bank should embrace the resolution and undergo a comprehensive review and analysis of what has gone wrong and what to do about it. And the bank should strongly recommit itself to doing what we want banks to do, serving communities by offering safe bank account products, mortgages, and small business loans, and supporting community development and household wealth building efforts. In light of all that has happened, who could be against that? Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Kevin. And finally, we'll hear from Byron Cooper, a former Wells Fargo customer who will share his story about his personal experience as a customer of the bank. Go ahead, Byron.
Thanks, Susanna. Hi, my name is Byron Cooper, and I'm an attorney. I've worked, or I should say I've had an account with Wells Fargo for over 20 years. I started in law school with student loans. I've had checking, savings accounts, retirement accounts, and mortgages with Wells Fargo. And, you know, over that period, I had some questions about the interest rates on some products, but I stuck with Wells Fargo's because, you know, I'd been with the bank for 20 years, but my relationship changed drastically in February of 2014. On February 14th, a Wells Fargo banker cold called me and asked about making changes to my free checking. I didn't know who this banker was, and so, you know, I told her, like I tell anyone, I don't discuss my financial matters over the phone, and I didn't know who this banker was, and I certainly wasn't going to discuss changing my bank or my savings accounts. And so, you know, the banker went on and, you know, started talking about making changes from my essentially free checking to a premium, adding a savings account and other things. And again, I told the banker, look, I don't discuss my banking over the phone with anyone. If I'm going to make a change to my account, I usually go in to the branch and I'll sit down and we can talk about it then. So, you know, I hung up the phone and thought essentially that was the end of it. Until later that evening, I got from the banker an allegedly confirming email with an attachment with an unsigned authorization form where she asked me to sign for the changes that she had asked to make. I immediately sent an email back saying, hey, look, I specifically said don't make any changes to my account. If you made any changes, please change it back. If I'm going to make any changes to my account or if you want to discuss it, I'll come into the branch. What was really surprising to me is that the form that was attached to that email had all of my personal information on it, Social Security number, birth date, driver's license number, all the data she had gone into my accounts and gotten and then put on this form and sent through the email, which caused me great concern for two reasons. First, a banker from a bank calling someone, cold calling someone. I would expect someone trying to commit fraud to do that, but for a banker to do it, I was just shocked at. And then to send through the email a form that had all of my personal information on it. The day she called was a Friday, and I sent that return email on a Friday, and then 2 days later, on Sunday, I sent a follow-up email again demanding that, you know, the banker not make any changes to my account, and if she did, change it back. That Monday was a holiday, so the first thing on Tuesday morning, I called the bank's 800 number. And when I spoke to the account representative, I told him I was calling to make sure that no changes have been made to my account, and the representative said, in fact, my free checking to be saved has been changed to a $30 a month premium checking account. $25,000 was taken from my checking account and put into a savings, and the free checking account was closed. I asked the representative to change all my account back to the way it was. And he said they couldn't do that because Wells Fargo no longer offered free checking. So the very next day, I went into the branch and I talked to the branch manager and said, look, I want all of my accounts changed back to the way they were. I showed him the emails where I got from the person who had called me and where I had sent emails back repeatedly saying, look, don't make any changes. And the branch manager essentially told me the same thing, that he couldn't change it back because Wells Fargo no longer offered free checking. And so I left, and the next day I went back, and I said, look, just close all of my accounts. I mean, I just found that completely outrageous that a bank would call you, and despite your protests and refusal to give them any information over the phone or to make any changes over the phone, to get information from your account, send it through the email, and then despite your protests, simply change all of your accounts anyway. So, you know, after I changed, or after I closed the account, I spent a full day running around opening up a new bank account, changing all of my automatic payments. It was quite shocking to me, first of all, that, you know, even despite my protests and going into the bank, quite frankly, you know, to me it appeared that this was something that was set up where it seemed like no one was really willing to help. I thought to myself, look, if this could happen to me, I have perfect credit, and I've been with the bank for 20 years, I was sure it was happening to others. And that's one of the main reasons I closed my bank account. To me, it smacked of the kind of things that were going on back in 2007, 2008. You know, after the incident happened and I changed my accounts, I spoke with several local TV stations. Once in a camera crew out, they did a story on the evening news, and then I filed a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You know, I would love to go back and initiate a relationship with Wells Fargo Bank, but quite frankly, I think it would take significant changes at Wells Fargo, given their past history, for me to put my money in the bank again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Byron. And now we'll move to take any questions. Again, go ahead and either type your questions in the question box or raise your hand and we'll unmute you so you can ask the question live. And please remember, if you can, to identify yourself and just let us know if you have a preference who the question is directed to. So we do have one question here from Kristen Broughton of American Banker. Kristen is wondering if any could comment on the choice of venue for the Wells Fargo annual meeting. Do you think holding the meeting 40 miles from the Jacksonville airport will discourage attendance of investors or protesters tomorrow? So that's open to all.
Well, this is Sister Nora, and I certainly can answer that question. As the primary proponent of the resolution, I left Philadelphia this morning at 7:30, but I was at Philadelphia Airport by 5:30, and I arrived here settled in this city of Ponte Verde about 2:30. Had some difficulty with weather problems at Atlanta because we went through Atlanta. That is one part of the problem. The other part of the problem, it's not an accessible area to have a shareholder meeting, and it's inappropriate to have it at a golf resort. I'm not there. I'm at Hampton Inn, 5 or 10 miles away. But I believe it is a little bit of shirking responsibility on the part of Wells Fargo to have the meeting at this location.
Yeah, if I could just add, this is Kevin. I was on mute, so you probably did not hear me laughing as the question was repeated. But yes, it does seem that that was the fact that the meeting is being held in an obscure location probably has something to do with the fact that people want to be at the meeting, and shareholders want to be at the meeting, and protesters most likely want to be at the meeting, and it is very hard for the public to and shareholders to access the meeting at its current location. And I know that we, for one, were unable to attend because it was a complicated trip. So it succeeded, at least as far as we are concerned.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Anyone else want to respond to Kristen's question? Should we move on?
Okay, so we have a question in the queue from Stacy Cowley. So Stacy, if you would describe your organization, and then also if you have a specific panelist in mind that you would like to answer that question, please also say that up front. Go ahead, Stacy.
Great, thank you. This is Stacy Cowley with the New York Times. This is for any of the panelists that have been in discussions with the bank recently. There isn't another slate of directors on offer at the moment. So if any directors were to be voted out or to not meet the 50% threshold, has there been any discussions with the bank about potential candidates or about what would happen then?
Hi, this is Michelle de Cordova from NEI. We have not been in discussion with the banks, but I can speak as to what our position has been on the directors, if that is of any interest.
Sure.
So we determined that we could not support the incumbent members of the board on this occasion. We thought about this long and hard. But a key part of our rationale for voting against incumbents was that in last year's proxy communications from the board, we didn't really feel that they'd indicated to shareholders that there was a serious concern about sales practices. In fact, the compensation disclosure at the company has made a positive reference to the cross-selling results for the past several years up to this year. And that is a concern to us because the report that Wells Fargo recently released has indicated to us that actually the sales practices were a board concern going back several years. And indeed, the review that was published last week by the U.S. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency seems to imply that concern could have arisen even earlier than indicated in the Wells Fargo report. And given that circumstance of not feeling that we had been informed as we could have been in the past, we felt we couldn't support the current board. We do recognize that some refreshment has begun at the board, and we understand that Wells Fargo needs to undertake board refreshment over a period of time, but we really felt we had no choice but to send this message of dissatisfaction to the board, and that's especially as the board had obviously chosen not to make the public commitment that we were looking for to undertake a comprehensive business standards review as set out in this proposal.
Thanks,
This
Michelle.
is Magaziner in Rhode Island, the state treasurer here. We are also planning to vote against all of the returning independent members of the board. And I'll just echo what's just said. I mean, at the end of the day, board directors are elected by shareholders to be our watchdogs and to be eyes and ears in the companies for us to make sure that our capital is being managed in a responsible manner. And clearly, shareholder capital was not being managed responsibly at the time that this scandal was unfolding. It was so widespread across the full organization that we also felt that we had to indicate our displeasure. At the end of the day, either the board was not aware that there was a widespread fraud that covered multiple branches, affected millions of customers, involved thousands of individuals within the bank, which would be unexcusable, or board members were aware of it but did not act in a timely manner, which would be even worse. So we also felt that no votes were appropriate for Rhode Island shares. If a majority of shareholders feel the way that we do, then we, of course, would welcome a dialogue with the bank on what more appropriate candidates would look like. But at this point, it's clear that the management and the board disagrees with our position, so we'll have to see what the shareholders, what the majority of the shareholders recommend, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
And this is Sister Nora. I would add to what Michelle and Seth have just indicated. Another reason for a little bit of, major dissatisfaction, I would say, with the board relative to the report that was really just written. There are two reports, and the board had to be very knowledgeable about what was happening. And in the report that we read that was 110 pages, I was very disappointed in the fact that the independent board and the rest of the board had to support the fact that this document revealed a board protection and not necessarily the protection of all the consumers and individuals that were concerned. I think that's very, very serious. I do believe that a little bit of remedy has been put into place, and the board would get some credit for taking action on separating the chair and CEO. And that also is because of one of the ICCR shareholders who filed that resolution. And in the process back in the fall, the separation of chair and CEO was put into effect. And now that there is a separate chair, I'm not saying that that is the right chair. I'm just saying that that is one step that is in the right direction. Another area that I've failed to mention, I think, because it's very important to us, under the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, we believe that the company should have had more robust due diligence to assess how its operations impact human rights of individuals. And Wells Fargo received a score of 0 in all 3 access to remedy categories of the Bank Track 2016 edition of the Banking with Principles. And I think that's a major responsibility of the executive and the board and management, and certainly the board failed in that area.
Thanks, Nora. I'm going to move on to another question. This is from Emily Glazer, Wall Street Journal. Can any of the panelists detail if you've been in touch with the bank in the past 2 weeks, that is, since the board released the results of its independent investigation? And if you have, who have you been in touch with, and what have they said in response to the shareholder proposal and or the choice to vote against re-electing directors to the board?
This is Sister Nora. I have been in touch with the corporate secretary and somebody else from the corporate secretary's office. And I made it very clear, in fact, when we received the definitive information that the board recommended a vote against our resolution. I, both in writing and verbally, indicated that it was time for them to change course and vote with us. And of course, that has not happened. Another communication was basically related to the meeting.
Anybody else want to speak to that question, or has just Sister Nora been in touch with them then? Okay, so we're moving on. Julie, have you got another question?
Yes, there is a question in the queue for Seth. This question is from Andrea Vittorio. So Andrea says, you are voting against all of Wells Fargo's sitting independent directors. Why do you think the board should be held accountable here? And do you think other investors will share your view and your vote?
Well, I think the board is accountable because we elected them to represent our interests, and our interests were clearly not served. You know, it would be one thing if this was a single rogue individual at some branch somewhere that was doing something inappropriate, but this was clearly much more widespread. This was, you know, a pattern of misbehavior that was widespread across multiple regions of the country, multiple individuals within the bank. There were whistleblowers who were ignored, and again, either the board was unaware that something so serious and widespread was going on for over a decade, which is inexcusable, or they did know about it and did not act in a timely manner, which would be even worse. So I feel strongly that our vote against these directors is appropriate, because at the end of the day, those 60,000 teachers and public employees whose pension money I manage took a hit due to this lack of oversight. We will see what the results of the vote are. I was very encouraged that ISS, one of the largest proxy voting advisors in the country, recommended a yes vote both on our proposal and a no vote on 12 out of the 15 directors. ISS is a widely respected arbiter of shareholder votes, so I hope that many investors will follow their lead, but we'll see how the results come out.
And this is Michelle. This is Michelle de Cordova, and just once again to echo what my colleagues have said, and to reiterate that part of our concern, and one of the reasons that we have decided that we can't support the incumbents is the fact that looking back over the disclosure that they have given us over the past several years, looking back over the proxy circulars, going back to 2011, we're looking at compensation disclosure there and explanations of compensation decision making over those 5 years that pointed to record cross-selling and success in the customer experience as key performance factors that affected the award decisions for senior executives, including for Ms. Tolstedt, but also for other executives. And we recognize that there have been significant clawbacks of that compensation, but still we cannot help going back to look at that disclosure and feeling that from the reporting that has come out most recently, it seems that there was something known about what was happening with respect to this controversy over the time that we, the shareholders, were being given a somewhat different story, and that is a great concern to us and a very important reason for us to feel unable to support incumbents at this time.
And Sister Nora can add, going back to 2009, when we worked very hard with Wells Fargo on credit card issues, we also worked with them on a direct deposit loan that was very, very impactful on lower income people. We felt that Wells Fargo was not addressing the suitability of the products for the customers. And we have seen that both in the credit card, the loan areas of mortgages, car loans, other loans. There's really no disclosure, and that is very troubling.
Okay, any other comments on this question, or should we move on? And Julie, are there other questions? Because I don't have any in the question box. Do you have anybody with their hand raised to ask a question?
No, I think that was our last question for today.
Okay, in the absence then of further questions, want to thank everybody, our speakers primarily, and all of you for joining us and for the good questions. So if there are any further questions, you can always reach out to me. I think you have my contact information, and I'll put you in touch with today's speakers. Just in case if you don't have my email, it's